I never thought a simple gift could turn into the beginning of a nightmare. My daughter had just turned 5, and like any child, she was thrilled to open the colorful presents stacked high at her birthday party. Between dolls, clothes, and games, there was a small box wrapped in bright paper with a shiny red bow. It looked ordinary, innocent, but what was inside would change everything about that night. She giggled as she tore the wrapping, her tiny hands eager to see what surprise awaited. Inside was something small, tucked neatly in tissue paper, smooth and solid. She thought it was candy, maybe even a magic stone, and before I could stop her, she put it straight into her mouth. The sound that followed froze me in place. A sharp crack echoed, and her joyful laughter twisted instantly into screams of pain. It wasn't candy at all. It wasn't even a toy. It was a raw piece of stone, cold and jagged, and in one careless bite, it had broken one of her front teeth. The sight of blood spilling from her innocent smile is something that still haunts me. Her birthday ended not with cake and candles, but with tears, panic, and a rushed trip to the emergency room. But as devastating as that moment was, something even darker began to gnaw at me. Who would place a stone inside a child's gift? Was it some sick joke, or was there a deeper reason, something more deliberate and cruel? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't an accident. That box, that stone, was meant to send a message. My name is Emily, I'm 24, and I'm raising my little girl on my own. Life has never been easy, but it has always been filled with love, laughter, and the small joys that only a child can bring. Until that day, I thought I could protect her from almost anything. But watching her clutch her face, blood dripping down her chin, shattered that belief in seconds. I can still hear her cries, see the fear in her eyes, and feel the crushing guilt pressing on my chest. Should I have checked the box first? Could I have stopped it? Part of me wanted to blame myself, but another part couldn't ignore the strangeness of it all. Out of all the beautiful presents she received, only one carried danger. That couldn't have been random. The memory of that box is burned into my mind. The red bow, the delicate wrapping, the stone hidden like a secret waiting to hurt her. Who would do such a thing? And why? Those questions refused to leave me alone, and as days passed, I knew I couldn't just shrug it off as a cruel coincidence. Something was wrong, and I needed to find out what. That's why I'm sharing this story with you. What started as an accident unfolded into something far more disturbing. Each step I took to uncover the truth pulled me deeper into a mystery I never asked for, one that still chills me. If you're drawn to real stories filled with suspense, secrets, and unexpected turns, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because what I uncovered next proves that even the smallest gestures can hide the darkest intentions. The emergency room was crowded, buzzing with the sound of worried voices and hurried footsteps, but for me, everything felt like a blur. My daughter's small hand clutched mine tightly, her face streaked with tears, while I tried to stay calm for her sake. Every time she opened her mouth, the sight of her broken tooth and the blood that wouldn't stop made my heart sink deeper. The nurses moved quickly, but inside me, there was nothing but guilt and fear. I kept replaying the moment over and over, asking myself why I didn't grab the box from her before she put it in her mouth. When the doctor finally examined her, his words were clinical, but they hit me hard. "The tooth is fractured," he said, explaining the next steps in a calm tone. He assured me it wasn't life-threatening, but hearing that my little girl would need dental procedures at such a young age crushed me. She didn't deserve this. Birthdays were supposed to be filled with joy, not pain. I kissed her forehead and promised it would be okay, even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. After what felt like hours, they discharged us with instructions for follow-up dental care. My daughter was exhausted, her head resting on my shoulder as we left the hospital. But I wasn't tired. I was restless. The image of that stone inside the gift box kept replaying in my mind. It was too strange, too deliberate. No one brings a rock wrapped in tissue paper to a child's birthday party unless there's a reason. And that thought alone made my stomach twist with unease. At home, after putting her to bed, I sat in the living room with the small box in front of me. I had taken it from the party before we rushed to the hospital. The wrapping paper was torn, but the red bow was still intact. I turned it over and over in my hands, looking for some clue. anything that could explain who gave it. But there was no card, no tag, no sign of who had left it on the gift table. That silence felt louder than any answer could. I tried to recall the party clearly. Friends, neighbors, parents from my daughter's preschool. Everyone had come by, dropping off presents, chatting, eating cake. But I couldn't remember who exactly had placed the little box there. Was I distracted? Was it slipped in when no one was watching? The more I thought about it, the more the details blurred together. And that terrified me, because if I couldn't remember, then anyone could have done it. The next morning, I asked my daughter if she remembered who gave her the small box. She shook her head, her face still swollen and sore. "It was just there," she whispered, her voice soft, as if she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I didn't push her. She was just a child, and she had already been through enough. But the lack of answers gnawed at me. If she didn't know and I didn't know, then the box had arrived unnoticed, and that was far from normal. I considered the possibility that it had been an innocent mistake. Maybe someone thought it was funny, or maybe they were trying to be creative with a mystery box kind of gift. But no matter how hard I tried, that explanation didn't sit right. There was no toy hidden inside, no note, no playful hint of a joke, just a stone, cold, heavy, and harmful. It didn't feel like carelessness. It felt intentional, and that realization made me shiver. I called my best friend, Sarah, who had been at the party, to ask if she remembered anything about the box. "I don't," she admitted after a long pause. "But Em, maybe you're overthinking this. Kids' parties are chaos. Maybe it was just weird luck." Her words were meant to comfort me, but they didn't. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about luck. I could hear the hesitation in her voice too, as if even she didn't believe what she was saying. That night, lying awake while my daughter slept peacefully beside me, my mind wouldn't stop racing. What if someone had wanted to hurt her on purpose? What if this wasn't random at all? The thought of someone targeting a 5-year-old was horrifying, but I couldn't shake it. I tried to push the fear away, telling myself I was imagining things. But fear has a way of settling in your bones, and mine wouldn't let go. Days passed, but the memory of the box lingered like a shadow in the corner of my mind. Every time I saw the gap in my daughter's smile, I was reminded of the rock that had caused it. I knew I had to find out the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. Because if someone had done this on purpose, then they were still out there, waiting, and I couldn't allow my daughter or myself to remain blind to the danger that might already be closer than I thought. And that's when I noticed something strange about the box itself that I hadn't seen before. The box sat on my kitchen table for days, untouched but never ignored. Every time I passed by, my eyes landed on it, like it was daring me to look closer. One night, when the house was quiet and my daughter was asleep, I finally gathered the courage to study it in detail. I put on gloves, as though protecting myself from something invisible, and carefully examined every inch. The paper was normal, nothing more than decorative wrapping. But the box itself, it wasn't store-bought. Its surface was slightly uneven, almost handmade, with faint creases that looked deliberate rather than accidental. I turned it over and noticed a mark I hadn't seen before. At first, it seemed like a smudge, but under the light, I realized it was something etched, like initials, but too faint to read clearly. I squinted, tracing my finger along the indentation. Was it just wear and tear, or had someone carved something intentionally? A chill spread across my skin. If someone had gone to the trouble of leaving a mark, then this wasn't random at all. It was personal. The next morning, I brought it up with Sarah again. She sighed over the phone. "Emily, you're spiraling. A rock in a box isn't exactly a crime. Maybe it was just trash someone tossed in as a joke." But her words only made me feel more isolated. No one else seemed to see the danger in it, and that meant I was alone in searching for the truth. I didn't argue with her, but I knew she was wrong. This wasn't trash. Someone had chosen this box, chosen that stone, and placed it where my daughter would find it. That was no accident. I tried to replay the birthday in my mind once more. Guests came and went. Laughter filled the house, music played, and children ran through the yard. But who had brought the small box? I remembered one moment when I was distracted, dealing with spilled juice on the floor, and someone brushed past me to drop something on the table. Could that have been it? The memory was vague, blurry, but the unease it gave me was sharp and clear. Determined to trace the box, I decided to check with every guest who had attended. One by one, I reached out. Text messages, calls, awkward conversations that all ended the same way. No one claimed it. Each parent insisted they brought toys, clothes, or books, nothing unusual. Some even sent me photos of what they had gifted. But the small box remained unclaimed, like it had appeared out of nowhere. That impossibility only deepened my dread. For a moment I considered whether it could have been left by someone not invited. The party had been open enough. Neighbors wandered in, acquaintances tagged along with friends. Could someone have slipped in unnoticed? The thought made me sick. I prided myself on protecting my daughter, on knowing the people around us. But the idea that a stranger could stand in my living room, pretending to celebrate while planting something meant to hurt her, was almost unbearable. Late that night, I took the box out again. This time, I noticed something inside I hadn't before. Beneath the tissue paper where the stone had been, there was a tiny shred of fabric stuck in the corner. I pulled it out carefully. It looked like a fragment of ribbon, but not the same as the red bow on top. This one was darker, almost black, frayed at the edges. I held it under the light, my heart racing. Was this a mistake left by whoever packaged it? Or was it meant to be found, a breadcrumb leading me somewhere I didn't want to go? I couldn't sleep after that discovery. Every creak in the house, every shadow outside the window made me jump. My daughter slept soundly beside me, oblivious, but I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering who was behind this. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that whoever left that box knew me. They knew where the gifts would be placed, when my guard would be down, and how much damage a single stone could cause. This wasn't random. It was calculated. The next day, I went through old photos on my phone, searching for any moment at the party when the small box appeared. Most pictures were of kids laughing, blowing out candles, playing games. But in the corner of one photo, barely visible, was the table with gifts piled up. And there it was, the box with the red bow, sitting neatly among the others. But what caught my attention wasn't the box itself. It was the blurred figure behind it, caught mid-motion, leaning forward as if placing it there. My heart stopped. Whoever they were, I didn't recognize them. I zoomed in on the photo, my fingers trembling, but the face was obscured, too blurred to identify. Still, the outline of their body, the way they hunched, the dark clothing, it all felt wrong. Whoever that person was, they didn't belong there. And suddenly, the weight of the box, the fragment of ribbon, the faint etching, all of it seemed connected, pointing to something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. And I knew that I couldn't ignore it anymore, because if that shadowed figure had been close enough to leave the box once, they could come back again. The photo became my new obsession. I studied it over and over, zooming in until the pixels blurred into meaningless dots. But my focus never wavered from the figure in the background. They were leaning over the table, their face angled away, hidden in motion, but their presence screamed louder than the rest of the joyful scene. Everyone else in the picture was smiling, clapping, caught in celebration. But this person seemed detached, almost deliberate in their movement. Whoever they weren't part of the fun. They were on a mission. I printed the photo, carried it with me, and showed it to Sarah, hoping maybe she'd recognize the figure. She frowned, tilting her head. Honestly, Em, I can't tell who that is. It's too blurry. She handed it back, shaking her head. But it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Lots of people were moving around that day. Her words frustrated me, but I couldn't blame her. To anyone else, it looked like a meaningless blur. But to me, it was a haunting shadow, a shadow that had entered my home unnoticed. I tried asking a few other parents from the party, but their reactions were the same. Polite confusion, reassurances that I was overthinking, and sympathetic smiles that felt more dismissive than comforting. No one wanted to believe something sinister could have happened at a child's birthday party. But I couldn't shake the certainty that this wasn't just in my head. The box was real, the rock was real, my daughter's broken tooth was real, and now the figure in the photo was real too. At night, paranoia grew. I started double-checking the locks, peeking through the blinds, leaving a light on in the hallway. Every noise outside felt amplified. The creak of a branch, the distant bark of a dog, the faint hum of a car engine. Sometimes I swore I could feel eyes on me, watching from the dark. I told myself it was just stress, my imagination filling in blanks, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. Fear has a way of making even silence feel threatening. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I noticed something odd outside. A car I didn't recognize was parked down the street, engine off, lights dimmed. It wasn't unusual for cars to stop in the neighborhood, but this one lingered. Minutes passed, then an hour. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing. But when I looked again, it was still there, and this time I thought I saw a silhouette behind the wheel, watching. My chest tightened as I pulled the curtains closed, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. But it didn't feel like coincidence. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That a blurry figure in a birthday photo and a parked car made me nervous? They'd dismiss me as paranoid, maybe even unstable. Still, the weight of not acting felt unbearable. I picked up the phone, hesitated, then set it back down. No report would erase the gnawing fear. The only thing I could do was remain vigilant and protect my daughter. The next day, I checked the box again, searching for anything I might have missed. That's when I noticed the faint carving on its underside wasn't just random scratches. It looked like letters. I traced them carefully with a pencil, shading over until they became clearer. E.H. My breath caught. Those were initials, but whose? My mind raced through possibilities. Neighbors, acquaintances, even old classmates. The letters didn't immediately match anyone close to me, but the fact that they were there at all was proof. This wasn't random. Someone wanted me to know it was theirs. I started to wonder if this was connected to my past. I hadn't lived a dramatic life, but there were people I had distanced myself from, relationships that ended badly, people who might carry grudges. Was it possible one of them resurfaced now, years later, in such a cruel way? I hated the thought, but it clung to me, heavy and suffocating. Whoever E.H. was, they had managed to reach into my present, into my daughter's life, and hurt us without ever showing their face. That night, I couldn't sleep. My daughter's soft breathing was steady beside me, but mine was shallow, uneven. Around midnight, I got up to check the locks again. When I passed the living room window, I froze. Across the street, under the faint glow of a streetlight, stood a figure, still, silent, facing my house. My heart slammed against my ribs as I ducked down, my pulse racing so loud it felt like it filled the room. I stayed there, crouched, barely breathing, until I dared to peek again. But the street was empty. The figure was gone. I wanted to believe it had been my imagination, just another trick of shadows, but I knew better. The blurred figure from the photo, the car that lingered, the initials carved into the box, it was all connected. And now, whoever they weren't just a shadow in the background anymore. They were here, close, watching. And with that realization came a terrifying truth. I wasn't just dealing with a mystery. I was dealing with someone who knew exactly where I lived, and they weren't afraid to remind me of it. The morning after I saw the figure outside my house, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. My nerves were stretched so thin that every sound felt like a warning, every shadow a threat. So I finally did what I had avoided. I called the police. My voice shook as I explained everything. The box, the rock, the initials, the figure across the street. The officer on the line listened politely, but his tone was flat, skeptical. He told me they couldn't investigate a box with a rock in it, nor a shadow that disappeared when I looked again. If there's no immediate danger, he said, there's nothing we can do right now. His words stung. To them, I was paranoid. To me, I was living in a nightmare. Hanging up left me feeling more alone than ever. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the initials E.H. carved into the box, determined to find answers myself. I pulled out my laptop and began searching. Names, initials, local directories. Nothing stood out. I combed through social media, typing E.H. into search bars, scrolling endlessly. My eyes blurred, but one thought refused to leave me. Whoever it was had been close enough to leave that box in my home. That meant they weren't just a name on a screen. They were here, in my world, walking the same streets. As the hours passed, I began to think about my past more carefully. Were there any connections I had forgotten? I thought about high school, about old classmates, people I hadn't spoken to in years. The initials nagged at me like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Then it hit me. Eric Hall. A boy I once knew, someone who had been quiet, strange, always hovering at the edges of groups but never quite fitting in. I hadn't thought about him in nearly a decade. But the memory of the way he used to stare, silently, as if memorizing every detail about people, sent a chill racing down my spine. Could it be him? The idea seemed far-fetched. But what other explanation was there? The coincidence was too strong. I tried to find him online, searching for any sign of his life now. A few scattered profiles appeared, some too vague, some clearly not him. But one account stood out. It didn't have a profile picture, just a dark, empty icon. The name was simple, E.H., and the bio contained only one sentence. Some things aren't meant to be forgotten. My blood ran cold as I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I clicked on the account, but there wasn't much there. Just a few posts, cryptic quotes about memory, loss, and shadows. Still, the timing, the initials, the eerie tone, it felt too close to ignore. I couldn't prove it was him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected. Closing the laptop didn't close the fear. If anything, it only deepened it. That night, I tucked my daughter into bed and sat awake in the living room, clutching a kitchen knife like it could shield me from the dark. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Around midnight, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly outside. My chest tightened. I crept to the window, careful not to make a sound, and peered through the curtain. At first, I saw nothing. But then, across the street, a flicker of movement. A figure standing just beyond the glow of the streetlight, watching. My breath hitched, and I froze, afraid even to blink. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my daughter was asleep, and I couldn't risk waking her into panic. Instead, I ducked down, heart pounding so loud it felt deafening. When I finally dared to peek again, the street was empty. Whoever it was had vanished into the night. But the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was heavier, darker, as though the danger hadn't left at all, but had only crept closer. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of the light, exhaustion making me imagine things. But deep down, I knew better. These weren't coincidences anymore. They were warnings, and the initials on the box, the shadow in the photo, the figure outside, they were all pointing to the same truth. Someone wanted me to know they were here, circling my life, inching closer with each step. I found myself jumping at the smallest things. A knock at the door, the mail slot creaking, even the hum of my phone vibrating on the table. Every sound was a trigger. I checked the locks 3-4 times before leaving the house. I avoided dark streets, even during the day, and yet the fear never left. It followed me like a shadow, always just behind me, always waiting. I knew I couldn't run forever. Whoever this was, whatever they wanted, they wouldn't stop until I faced them. That night, as I tried to calm my racing thoughts, I heard it, a soft scratching sound at the back door. My body froze, every muscle tightening in terror. I grabbed the knife again, my hands shaking, and crept toward the sound. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst. When I finally reached the door, the scratching stopped. Silence. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath. And then, faintly, barely audible, came a whisper, "Emily." My blood turned to ice. I didn't sleep that night. After hearing my name whispered through the back door, I stayed frozen in place for what felt like hours, clutching the knife, every nerve in my body burning. When the first rays of sunlight finally slipped through the curtains, I allowed myself to breathe again. But even in daylight, I couldn't shake the sound of that whisper. It was soft, deliberate, spoken with familiarity. Whoever it was, they weren't just watching anymore. They wanted me to know they were there. I tried to keep calm for my daughter's sake, forcing myself to smile and act normal as I made her breakfast. But my hands trembled when I poured her cereal, and my eyes darted constantly to the window, half expecting to see someone standing there. She asked me, "Mommy, are you okay?" And I lied, saying I was just tired. Inside, I was unraveling. I knew I had to act before things escalated even further. Later that day, I locked myself in the bedroom with my laptop and searched for Eric Hall again. After hours of scrolling, I found an old forum post mentioning his name, something about him living nearby in a neighboring town. My chest tightened. If it was the same Eric, then he wasn't far at all. The more I read, the more pieces started to fall into place. Stories of him being quiet, strange, and withdrawn. Rumors that he'd been obsessed with certain people in the past, following them without their knowledge. I couldn't be sure if these were true, but they sounded too familiar, too close to what I was experiencing now. I thought about reaching out to the police again, showing them what I had found. But then I remembered their dismissive tone, the way they brushed me off before. Without solid proof, they'd do nothing. And proof was exactly what I didn't have. Just whispers in the night, initials on a box, and a shadow in a photo. None of it would hold up. If I wanted answers, I would have to find them myself. That evening, after putting my daughter to bed, I checked the house twice, securing every lock, every window. Yet the sense of vulnerability lingered. I carried the knife with me from room to room, unable to shake the feeling that something, or someone, was already inside. My ears strained for sounds, and when the house creaked, I nearly dropped the blade. Fear had burrowed so deeply into me that I didn't know what was real anymore. Around midnight, I heard it again. Not scratching this time, but the faintest creak of a floorboard. From inside, my blood went cold. I held my breath, straining to listen. There it was again, a slow, deliberate step. My daughter was asleep in the next room. My mind raced with panic as I gripped the knife tighter, every muscle in my body quivering. Someone was in the house. I moved silently toward the hallway, the darkness pressing in on me. Each step felt impossibly loud, though I barely made a sound. The air felt heavier, thicker, as though the house itself knew something terrible was about to happen. Then, at the end of the hallway, I saw it, a shadow, tall and still, lingering just beyond the doorway to the living room. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The figure didn't flinch, didn't step forward. They just stood there waiting. Summoning courage I didn't know I had, I whispered, "Who are you?" My voice cracked, but the figure didn't answer. Instead, they tilted their heads slightly as though studying me. My grip on the knife tightened, my hands slick with sweat. Seconds stretched into eternity, and then, without warning, the figure turned and slipped into the darkness. My body moved on instinct. I ran after them, my bare feet slapping against the floor, but when I reached the living room, it was empty. The back door was ajar, swaying slightly as if someone had just slipped out. My heart raced, adrenaline coursing through me. Whoever they were, they had been inside my house, feet away from me, feet away from my daughter. The reality of it hit me like a storm. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real. The box, the initials, the photo, they weren't just clues. They were warnings. And now the person behind them wasn't lurking in the shadows. They had crossed the line. They had entered my home. I rushed to my daughter's room, nearly tripping over myself in panic. She was still asleep, her small body curled peacefully under the blankets. Relief flooded through me, tears streaming down my face as I whispered promises to protect her. But deep down, I knew promises weren't enough anymore. Whoever had done this wasn't finished. They had already proven they could reach us, and that meant the next time, they might not leave without taking something far more precious. When I look back at that night, the memory of the shadow inside my home is the one that still chills me the most. It wasn't the sound of the rock breaking my daughter's tooth, or the blood that stained her smile, or even the whisper of my name at the door. It was the undeniable truth that someone had crossed into our safe space, walked our floors, breathed our air, and stood only steps away from the most important person in my life. That realization broke something inside me. It stripped away the illusion of safety I had always clung to. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the fear. Every corner of the house felt tainted, every creak of the floorboards made me freeze. I stayed awake at night, knife in hand, waiting for the sound of footsteps that might come again. But the shadow never returned. The silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. It left me constantly wondering, were they done? Or were they simply waiting for the right moment to strike again? I went to the police once more, this time with everything. The initials on the box, the blurred photo, the online account with those haunting words, the whisper I swore I heard. They listened, they wrote it down, but still they couldn't promise anything. Without hard evidence, there was little they could do. Walking out of that station, I felt more powerless than ever. But deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. It couldn't be, because this wasn't just about me. It was about my daughter, her innocence, her safety, her future. Whoever left that gift, whoever stood in the shadows of my home, had crossed a line that could never be undone. And while I may never know their true face, or why they chose to target us, I know one thing for certain. I will never stop protecting her. I will never let fear win. Sometimes I think about Eric Hall, about those initials carved into the box, about the online profile and its message. Was it really him? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone I haven't even thought of yet, lurking in the background, waiting for another chance. Those questions haunt me, and maybe they always will. But I've learned that some mysteries don't come neatly wrapped with answers. Sometimes they linger, hanging over you like a shadow that never quite fades. So what do you do when your world is invaded by something you can't fully understand? You keep going. You stay alert. You refuse to let fear take away the light that your loved ones bring. And that's exactly what I've chosen to do. Every day, I carry both the scars and the strength that came from this nightmare. And every night, I lock the doors, double-check the windows, and remind myself that vigilance is the only way forward. And now I share this story with you, not just as a warning, but as a reminder. Evil doesn't always come dressed as a monster in the dark. Sometimes it comes wrapped in bright paper, tied with a bow, looking innocent until it cuts deep. It can sit quietly in the corner of a photo, blur into the background, whisper your name when you least expect it. But just because it hides doesn't mean it isn't real. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Thank you for listening, for walking with me through the fear, for hearing the whispers that have followed me long after the box was opened. And if you want to hear more stories like this, true stories, filled with suspense, secrets, and the dark truths that often go unseen, then I ask you, subscribe to this channel. Join me so you never miss what comes next. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones we see clearly. They're the ones that linger in the shadows, waiting.